Non-binary icon Donald Trump once said,
What are your pronouns?
I don't want pronouns. I don't want pronouns.
so if even he knows that gender is a human-made construct, why can't other people get with the program? It seems trans panic has officially hit the Olympics. Algerian boxer Iman Khalif scored a victory Thursday over her opponent Angela Carini, who after less than a minute into their bout had to duck out. When she pulled herself out of the fight, she said something along the lines of she'd never been hit like that before. And without missing a beat, the anti-trans ghouls came out of the woodwork to make a big stink out of something that was nothing, to start up the trans panic train and drive it right into the station of this Algerian athlete's life. Now, in Algeria, being queer is a crime, being trans is definitely a crime. And this is not a trans person. This is a cis woman who has a condition that leads to a higher level of testosterone. So the ghouls like Rowling and Elon Musk came out and were saying men don't belong in women's sports, yada, yada, yada. And this is a woman in women's sports. I don't know why it's a problem. She was disqualified in 2023 or something for having higher levels of testosterone, which is again due to the condition that she has. And you know, people have differing levels of testosterone either way. So I don't know where you draw the line with what you're going to test for anyway. And besides that, I mean, it's sports, right? I mean, this conversation has been had a million times, but we celebrate genetic advantages and disadvantages in sports all the time. I mean, you know, people are taller or shorter in basketball, right? Different lengths. Michael Phelps is like particularly well adapted for swimming. Like, who cares? Like, that's just, sports is always people having an advantage over somebody else, and maybe somebody who has less advantage winning over someone else. You know, it gets to the point where you want to hate trans people. That's all you want to do, and that's obviously what you're going out to do, and it's weird because you're really obsessed with what's going on in people's pants. That's a weird thing. You're weird for that. So anyway, in a really good article from The Cut by Andrea Gonzalez Ramirez, she interviews Rose Eveleth, who's a science journalist and the host of Tested, which is a new podcast exploring the history of sex testing in sports that highlights similar accusations levied against elite female runners, including South African runner Caster Semenya. The whole article is really interesting. It's a great interview, but one of the things that I found particularly interesting in the interview was this question and the answer that followed it. It's striking that this controversy seemed to bubble up only after Khalif's bout, where her Italian opponent quit in 46 seconds after being punched in the nose and tearfully told reporters that she'd never been hit like that. What do you make of what happened and the speed in which this has become a political issue? Eveleth responds, "You see these echoes through history. In 1928, when women were first allowed on the track, you had a Canadian columnist who was there as a part-time coach, complaining that her beautiful, feminine girls were getting beaten by these borderline cases, as she called them. It's sort of depressing. I'm like, wow, some of these headlines that I'm seeing in 2024 could have been printed in 1928. We're having the same conversation. The other thing that I think is worth noting about these women in particular is that they didn't just show up at the Olympics. Khalif has been boxing for years, and she has never had anybody say, publicly at least, any of the things that you're hearing now. So I have to wonder, how much of this is that the fight didn't go the way you wanted? To be clear, I don't know these people. It is hard to be an elite athlete. It's hard to lose, but you see that many people only care about these women when they're winning. It may seem like it's not a big deal to you, especially if you don't really care about trans issues too much, or even if you're just like, well, whatever, I'm not connected to this. But here's where it gets dangerous. Some observers are concerned about Khalif's well-being because Algeria criminalizes homosexuality and bans people from changing their gender identity on official documents such as passports. Have you found other instances in which this type of pile-on puts athletes at risk? I do worry about it. I hope that she has good people around her. When I was reporting for Tested, one of the big questions athletes would all ask is this going to be a show about trans athletes? And if so, I don't want to participate, because I cannot be lumped in with trans people. You could die when there is so much confusion and intentional muddying of the waters of people calling these women trans when they're not. Suddenly, it's no longer safe in their country. One of the athletes I interviewed, Nisha, is from Uganda, which has incredibly regressive and terrifying laws around being queer. She had to seek asylum in Germany because she's queer. She also was targeted by these policies around eligibility by World Athletics. I also know one athlete from Africa, and I'll be vague here because I don't want to out her, who is trying to get asylum in the US. There are real-world implications and dangers here. How does what's happening now with Olympic women's boxing fit into the broader history you examined in the podcast of sex testing in elite sports? We're in this horrible Groundhog Day over and over again. Women keep being thrust into this nightmare media circus around their so-called true identity and who they really are by random people who have never met them, and who somehow know more about their biology and who she really is inside than she does. There's a lot of variation in human sex biology, far more than I think most people realize. Women can have Y chromosomes in some or all of their cells. Women can have high testosterone. Women can have internal testes. You can have it all. And this is before we start talking about trans identity. There's no one test that you can give to everybody and say, okay, this test is going to tell me who's a man and who's a woman. It does not exist, because human biology is more complicated than that. So what are we doing here? We have to treat these people better. I think the danger is very evident when you look at people like trans ghoul J.K. Rowling. Look at the tweet she made. Could any picture sum up our new men's rights movement better? The smirk of a male who knows he's protected by a misogynist sporting establishment, enjoying the distress of a woman he's just punched in the head, and whose life ambition he's just shattered. Wow, JK, for a TERF, you really just put a cis woman's life in danger there, didn't you? Amin Khalif was born as female. She has a hormonal disorder similar to women with PCOS. This far-right spin is nothing but masked transphobia, and it's sad to see people who actually are intelligent enough to read spread this lie. Meanwhile, some of your daddies have low testosterone and titties, while your granny has a full mustache. You're all ignorant pieces of shit. Have the day you deserve. Smooches. Don't be that person. Stop freaking out about what other people got in their pants.